we are going to do today is a very brief overview of the First World War. This is the First World War for AP World History, all right? If you want more, you can go on my IB history videos, and I've got some more in-depth lectures on the First World War for IB history. It goes into much more depth than you guys need for AP World. So all we want to make sure we can walk out of today with is an understanding of why the First World War, or why the First World War began, how the First World War was fought, and then the impacts of that war. So first, we want to take a look at this map. And here's a map of Europe in 1914, and we notice that there's a lot of things very different about this map from the map that we're used to today. And here we go. Already, we're starting with some major geographic boundary changes because of the First World War. Anything different that you guys notice here? Tyler, start us off.
No Poland.
Okay, there is no Poland on the map. It doesn't exist in 1914. Brandon.
Austria-Hungary.
Okay, we've got this entity called Austria-Hungary. We got an Austro-Hungarian Empire. Yes, sir?
The Ottoman Empire still exists.
Very good. There's an Ottoman Empire on the map. That's, of course, not there today. There's other countries that aren't on this map, like
Belarus.
Austria itself and Hungary itself and Czechoslovakia, or the Czech Republic and Slovakia. We don't have the Yugoslavian states, the South Slavic states. We've got a much bigger Germany, right? We've got a Russia that is bigger than it is today. We don't see a Ukraine. So there's a lot of differences on this map from the one that we're used to today. And that's really where we start with talking about the origins of the First World War. When we lead up to World War I, we want to recognize that there is a power balance in Europe, or there's meant to be a power balance in Europe. And this goes back to 1815 and the Congress of Vienna. If you guys remember me talking about that, this comes on the tail end of the Napoleonic Wars. When European officials got together in Vienna, Austria in 1815, and they attempted to put the continent back together so another Napoleon couldn't happen again. So one country couldn't gain like absolute power in Europe again and do what Napoleon had done in the first decade and a half of the 19th century. By the time we get to 1914, though, we have some upsetting of that balance of power. Going back to 1815, the powerhouses in Europe were Britain and Russia, and Germany didn't exist. There was a country called Prussia, and that was over here. And then there were like German principalities that weren't united with each other. There was an Austria. This is even before Austria and Hungary are going to join with each other. There was an Austria. So we got an Austria and a Russia and a Prussia. Oh, and France. Let's not forget France. France and Britain. Those are the great powers of Europe. In 1871, something happens to change the balance of power. Tyler.
Franco-Prussian War.
Very good. There's a war between France and the Prussians.
And Prussia wins.
And Prussia wins, and at the end of that war, at the end of that Franco-Prussian War, Prussia will unite with the German principalities to form a new German empire. And that is now this big Germany that we see here. And that is going to give this new Germany one of the most powerful militaries on the planet, arguably the most powerful land army on the planet. Combining that with tremendous economic resources of what is the Rhine Valley, the areas in Germany around the Rhine River. So Germany is going to become a ridiculously powerful military state and economic state. Yes?
And also, they won the French region of Alsace-Lorraine.
And they also take and we'll mention that in a moment, they also take a chunk of territory from France, or two chunks of territory. One region called Alsace and another called Lorraine. So we've got this balance of power in Europe from 1815 that gets a little bit upset by 1871 and the unification of Germany. But it holds on largely until 1914. From 1815 to 1914, for that 100-year period, there really aren't any major conflicts in Western Europe. Most of this is pretty relaxed. In the 1850s, there is a war that Britain and France kind of joined with the Ottomans to fight against the Russians, but that's a relatively small conflict. There is the Franco-Prussian War, but that's a relatively small conflict. In the 19th century, when there were wars, they were relatively short and typically between only a couple nations. So they weren't really that devastating in Europe. They didn't have anything in Europe, for example, like we had with the American Civil War. Nothing that big went down. So as we push to 1914, historians like to talk about a few big ideas that propel the world to global war. A historian in the 1920s came up with an acronym that history teachers still use to this day, and we're going to use it in our class to just help you remember it. And we're going to go with MAIN, M-A-I-N. You can think the main causes of the First World War. MAIN. We're going to go through each one of them. MAIN, militarism. That's our M. In the lead up to the war in 1914, we're going to see tremendous growth in the size of nations' militaries. All right? We're going to see tremendous growth in the size of nations' militaries. You guys probably can't make out all these numbers from where you're sitting, but we can see 1908 to 1913 for each of these lines. And Britain, and France, and Germany, and Austria, and Russia, they're all going to be dramatically expanding their militaries. Essentially, there is a global arms race taking place. We're going to talk about another arms race when we get to the Cold War. There's an arms race in the early 20th century, with each of these nations growing their militaries and then simultaneously noticing what's happening next door to them and saying, well, geez, they're getting bigger faster. We better do the same. So if German military is growing, and look at this, in Germany, 458 million in 1910. They actually had a little drop in 1911, 428 million. Then up to 424 million. Then, by 1913, 573 million expended. That's like a 20% increase on military expenditures in that 1 year. France has got to do the same. Britain has got to follow suit. Russia's got to follow suit. Everybody is dramatically growing the size of their military. The area that it is most noticeable is in the naval arena, with Germany attempting to build a modern navy to compete with that of, who do you think's got the most powerful navy? To compete with the British at this time. And the arms race is best seen in the development of a new battleship that the British first develop and then the Germans follow, a steel-hulled steam battleship. And I just had an absolute brain fart of the class of battleship. Oh my goodness!
Destroyer, gunboat.
No. I can't. It's gone. It's in there somewhere, and it is rattling around. Google World War I battleship, and it is the.
It's definitely not the air.
I'm
Follow me on Twitter.
horribly embarrassed right now. But anyway, we're going to press on. As Germany can't quite keep up with the size of the British Navy, they start putting a lot of their resources in building a submarine fleet. And that's going to be important to our story going forward as well.
U-boats.
No, not U. Well, okay, U-boat is a German submarine. All right. So we've got this arms race. Yes, sir.
Ironclad.
No, not ironclad. It's American Civil War.
You were talking about German submarine. Wait.
All right. Forget it. Don't worry about it. Let's keep pressing.
Dreadnought.
Thank you. Dreadnought. Thank you. He's got the quickest thumbs in the class.
How do you spell that?
Dreadnought. D-R-E-A-D-N-A-U-G-H-T.
That's why he's in the quiz ball here.
N-O-U-G-H-T. Thank you. You guys are killing me here. So a dreadnought battleship developed first by Britain, then copied by Germany, is putting Germany on the map. But as Germany starts building a bigger navy, what is Britain going to have to do? They're going to have to build a bigger navy. And much like it said, like, you don't pick up a hammer unless you're going to, like, nail something. You don't build these big militaries unless you're willing to use them, all right? So militarism is one aspect that can be used to see why war will ultimately break out in 1914. Yeah?
And Britain had a policy that its navy is going to be twice the size of every other navy combined, of all the countries combined. That's a good policy. They did.
Before World War I?
Yeah, I think so.
I think you might be thinking after World War I and some of the agreements after Germany's navy is crippled. Yeah. Just an example of a new battleship on the scene. All right. Imperial rivalries. This is our I. Imperial Rivalries.
Can we go to A?
Oh, shoot. I guess I'm doing Mayan. Okay, let's do A. Alliances. That's fine. We'll do A.
Was entangled in alliance.
Wow, what a mess today. So, our A is going to be alliances. All right? From the late 19th century into the early 20th century, all of those great powers are going to ally with one another in one form or another. All right? And it starts off with Germany recognizing that it's got some issues. That it is right next door to a France. And they just went to war with each other. They're hostile to each other. All right? And Germany wants to make sure that if another war were to break out, that they might have friends to fight along with them. So Germany starts courting friends. And they look over to Austria-Hungary, and they look over to Russia, and they're like, man, we could be friends with you guys. But they pick Austria-Hungary. They choose Austria-Hungary mainly because, one, there's like a language connection between the Austrian leadership in Austria-Hungary and Germans. But also, Austria-Hungary, by this point in the 19th century, is a shrinking power. They're a weaker power. Russia's got some problems, but they're still the most massive nation on the planet, right? With resources and population unparalleled by any other European nation. So if Germany got into a relationship with Austria-Hungary, Germany could absolutely be dominant. That might not be the case with Russia. So Germany and Austria-Hungary will sign an alliance called the Dual Alliance. Which essentially means if either Germany or Austria is attacked, the other will step up and defend. So to attack one is to attack them both. Italy will eventually join into that same alliance, and it becomes the Triple Alliance.
Italy joins with Germany again.
Italy joins with Germany and Austria-Hungary in the pre-war years in what's known as the Triple Alliance. As France sees these alliances develop, France begins to court Russia for an agreement. And France and Russia will sign what is known as the Dual Entente. An entente is a French word for agreement. Where France and Russia will agree to defend each other if the other gets into a conflict. And now we see Germany stuck in a very rough position, right in between two countries allied with each other and antagonistic towards Germany, especially France is antagonistic towards Germany. Yes? Entente? E-N-T-E-N-T-E. It's dual, like two, D-U-A-L, Entente, E-N-T-E-N-T-E. So now you've got an alliance essentially between Germany and Austria-Hungary and an alliance between France and Russia, all right? Now, Britain is going to be an important story to World War I, but Britain does not have the same kind of agreements with France and with Russia, or that France and Russia have. Germany's only treaty obligation leading up into World War I is actually a treaty with neutral Belgium. Now, yes, the Treaty of London, that was signed back in 1839. All of these countries, well, Prussia before Germany existed, signed this Treaty of London to guarantee Belgian neutrality. Belgium, a new country on the scene, all of the great powers agreed Belgium shouldn't be messed with. Belgium is to remain neutral. That is Britain's only treaty. But you're going to see, as the war unfolds, that will push Britain into an alliance with France and Russia. So we've got these alliances. Now, with regard to the alliances, what does this mean? It means if a squabble starts between any two of these countries, it can quickly grow into something much, much bigger. All right? Then we have our imperialism. And imperialism is directly linked with that militarism that we've already talked about. Imperialism has been the name of the game, and we've already talked about this through the 19th century, with countries trying to grow an overseas empire. And there's a couple reasons why we grow overseas empires. Find new markets to sell goods in, find resources for the production of goods. Another aspect of imperialism, though, is the growth of the militaries to facilitate these empires. So militarism and imperialism is very closely tied together. And we've already talked about who's got the biggest empire in the world in 1900. The British Empire. The sun never sets on the British Empire. France has also got a tremendous empire in Africa and in Southeast Asia. Even little Belgium has its hands on an empire in the form of the Belgian Congo. All right? But Germany is late to the game. Germany is only founded as a new country in 1871, right? The first German chancellor, a guy named Otto von Bismarck, was more happy building a continental empire than worrying about what was going on overseas. So by the time we get to the early 1900s, the leader of Germany, a guy named Kaiser Wilhelm II, he's like, oh man, Britain's got such a better empire, France has got a better empire, even Belgium has a better empire than us. And they want to answer the back door. They want to have what the Germans would refer to as their place in the sun. If the sun never sets on the British Empire, Germany wants their place in the sun. They want an empire like other nations. And we will leave it at this for AP World. As Germany begins to hunt for an empire to try to create their own, they're going to start bumping elbows with already established empires, especially in Africa, and especially between Germany and France, two countries that are already antagonistic towards each other. So now we've got the growth of these militaries, we've got imperial rivalries, we've got an alliance system that if any big conflict starts, it can quickly grow into something even more massive. And then let's finish with a discussion of nationalism. Nationalism is a theme that is born in the 19th century. We've already talked about this in the fifth era of AP World, right? Where individuals desire to be in a national entity with people that are like them and to not be dominated by outsiders. And this is most evident in the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Austria-Hungary, by 1914, is a weakening power, but it is still one of these, what I've called a massive multi-ethnic empire. And you can look at this map, and you guys can't make out all the words, but we've got red for Germans, and green for Hungarians, and bluish for Czechs, and orange for Slovaks, and purple for Poles, and we've got, I don't even know, that Ukrainians, I can't read it there, Slovenians. We've got all different kinds of people living within the Austro-Hungarian Empire, all right? And as the ideas of nationalism grows, many of these people would like to be a part of their own nation rather than being a part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Like, for example, why would Serbs, and you can see down here, we've got a lot of there's a nation of Serbia, but there's a lot of Serbs that are living within Austria-Hungary. Those Serbs, many of those Serbs, would much rather live in a Serb nation or a bigger Serbian nation than, for example, living in Austria-Hungary. All right? So nationalism is going to be a factor, and you'll see how that's going to develop. So when we combine militarism and alliances and imperialism and nationalism, we get a First World War. Now, of course, there's got to be something that happens that triggers all of this. Because the reality is, before 1914, there was militarism. Before 1914, there was imperialism and alliances and nationalism. This stuff wasn't born in the summer of 1914 when World War I breaks out. These are long-term factors that are pre-established. And then something happens in the summer of 1914 to get the ball all rolling. And that something is going to take place in a city called Sarajevo. Sarajevo is in a region of Austria-Hungary called Bosnia. And in Sarajevo, in June of 1914, you don't need to memorize these dates, and I'm giving you a little more detail than you need, just hear the story. In June of 1914, June 28th of 1914, the Archduke of Austria-Hungary, a guy named Franz Ferdinand, he's going to be on an official procession through the streets of Sarajevo with his wife and his entourage to dedicate a memorial. Now, Franz Ferdinand is kind of an interesting guy. And let me give you a little background that you can just hear, so eyeballs on me. You don't need to write this down. Franz Ferdinand is the heir apparent. He is the next in line to be the Emperor of Austria-Hungary. All All right? His uncle, Franz Joseph, is the old and almost on the way out emperor of Austria-Hungary. Franz Joseph, kind of sad guy, he doesn't have a son. All right, his son died. So Franz Ferdinand is going to be the next guy. But Franz Ferdinand is young and he's modern and he's got some different ideas about how to rule the empire. When Franz Ferdinand looks at this empire, he says, this is problematic. And all of these competing nationalisms are causing us problems. So I've got an idea. I think we should establish Austria-Hungary as more of a federal state, rather than a central authority state out of Vienna like we've been running. Now, you guys live in a federal state. What is a federal state? Yes, sir.
You have different, like, smaller countries that serve within a bigger branch.
Very good. Like we have in the United States, guys. We have a federal government in Washington, D.C., and then we have 50 state governments that can handle issues that are handled according to our Constitution by the state. That is a federal system. So culturally and even politically, Texas can be very different from New York. They can set up their own rules within the parameters of the Constitution. That's what Franz Ferdinand wants to do with Austria-Hungary. Say, hey, we got all these different people. Maybe we should let the Serbs down in Bosnia have some limited self-rule. And the central government will handle big things like the currency issues and foreign diplomacy and military issues. But for local issues, all these local regions can do their own thing. And that would maybe make everybody a lot happier. Well, it's not making everybody happier. All right? There's going to be a group of radical Serbs called the Black Hand. And this group, the Black Hand, does not like Franz Ferdinand at all, nor do they like Austria-Hungary. They want to create an independent Serbia, or to join all the Serbs that live in Austria-Hungary, to have them join with the already independent Serb nation. And the problem is, if Franz Ferdinand gets his way, if we get this federal state in Austria-Hungary, well then there might not be a lot of Serbs who are that angry anymore. They might be, hey, we're totally cool with living in Austria-Hungary now because they let us live by ourselves or do our own thing. And the Black Hand wants a violent shakeup. They want to break up Austria-Hungary so they could absorb that territory. So in June of 1914, members of this terrorist organization called the Black Hand, a Serb terrorist organization, plan an assassination of the Archduke of Austria-Hungary. And in the morning of the 14th, they throw a couple bombs at the Archduke's procession, and they fail. They miss. They don't kill him. They injure some of his entourage, though. The Archduke survives, and he continues on with his day.
How would you do that?
Because he's, I don't know. Okay, assassination attempts today, especially in the Western world, are crazy. They don't happen very much. Around the turn of the century, they happened quite a bit. The United States had a president assassinated in James Garfield. Then we had another president assassinated in William McKinley, right? This was not, and 20 years before both of them, we had Abraham Lincoln, of course. So political assassinations were on the rise around the turn of the century. We get anarchist movements. We've already talked about this, socialist movements. There's a lot of political assassination attempts. And so this is par for the course for Franz Ferdinand. And he doesn't want to go cowering. He's the future leader of the empire. And in fact, not only does he want to not cower, he says, hey, let's change our plans today. Let's go visit those in our entourage at the hospital that were injured in the earlier attack. But this wasn't in the plans, and the driver didn't already have plans for this, and they kind of got stuck in a narrow turn, and they had to backtrack and double back. And as his car was turning around, it just so happened to be turning around in front of a cafe where one of these assassins, a guy named Gavril Princip, was having lunch. He's kind of sulking over, you can imagine him sulking over his sandwich, frustrated that he failed at his one attempt at glory, right? And then the Archduke ends up getting stuck right in front of him. He pops out of the cafe, he pulls out his pistol, and he fires at the Archduke and his wife, who happened to be pregnant at the time. And he kills both the Archduke and his wife. And Gavril Princip is quickly apprehended. He's going to go to prison. Not a big deal for him because he'll die of tuberculosis in there. He's already sick. So no big deal there. But then the ball starts quickly rolling towards war. Austria-Hungary is furious, and they're furious at Serbia. They're furious at Serbia because they blame Serbia for this attack. In fact, there was a member of the Serb military high command that was affiliated with the Black Hand. That doesn't mean Serbia really knew this attack was going on, but there could have been connections. Austria-Hungary says to Serbia, hey Serbia, you're going to let us go into your country and investigate this crime. Serbia says, no, you can't do that, because then we would cease to be a sovereign nation. Let us investigate, and we'll let you know what we find. Austria-Hungary says, that ain't going to fly. But Serbia's got a friend. Serbia's got a friend in Russia. Now, why would Russia care about Serbia? Let's go back to this map really quick. We got two reasons why Russia would care about Serbia. Yes, Tyler?
They're both Slav.
Okay, they have a mutual admiration for each other and in their Slavic heritage. We're going to talk in AP World lecture not too long from now about pan-Slavism, kind of a nationalism of all Slavic people standing together. So there's that. Russia is going to look out for Serbia because they're both Slavic peoples. But then Russia also sees something else that can come. If Russia gets involved in a conflict with Serbia and Austria-Hungary, maybe if they win, if they can defeat Austria-Hungary, that's going to push Russia closer to the Mediterranean Sea and give Russia that warm water port that they had long coveted. That's what Russia's looking for. Austria-Hungary is not stupid. Austria-Hungary knows that there's a relationship between Russia and Serbia. So Austria-Hungary can't just go attacking Serbia, because then they'd have to tangle with Russia. Austria-Hungary can probably defeat Serbia, they think, but they can't defeat Russia on their own. So they go to Germany and they say, hey, Germany, here's the deal. We've got beef with Russia. Or we got beef, pardon me, with Serbia. But if we go to war with Serbia, we're going to have beef with Russia. What say you? And Germany issues what is known as the blank check, where the German government says to Austria, Austria, Serbia is your business. If you want to attack Serbia, you go ahead and attack Serbia. But please be assured, we will stand behind our long agreements with you. That dual alliance that we already have together, if you are attacked by anybody, like Russia, we will support you. So Germany says to Austria, do what you got to do with Serbia. We've got your back if Russia steps in. Now, this gets the clock ticking for Germany. Because Germany knows now that Austria is going to go to war with Serbia. And Germany knows that if Austria goes to war with Serbia, then Russia is going to go to war with Austria, or they believe that. And if Russia goes to war with Austria, then Germany is going to have to go to war with Russia, which leaves Germany in a pickle, because Germany is encircled by an alliance between France and Russia. And so Germany had developed a plan for such an occurrence, and it was known as the Schlieffen Plan.
Out of all the good plans, they chose this.
Schlieffen Plan is down here on the bottom of the slide. The Schlieffen Plan.
Wait, so if Austria attacks Serbia,
Yes.
Russia's going to step in for Serbia. So then when Russia steps in for Serbia, Germany's going to have to step in against Russia?
Yes. Because of their alliances. And I will run through it really quickly again. So the Schlieffen Plan is Germany's peacetime war plan. It's what they came up with, how to fight a war. Germany wants to avoid the dreaded situation of having to fight a two-front war, fighting on both their east and west. Because if Germany has to fight on both fronts, what do they have to do to their army?
They split the army.
They have to split their army in half. So the Schlieffen Plan says, if we're going to get into a war with France and with Russia, we don't want to fight them both at the same time. So in the Germans' mind, France is a more serious threat immediately. So we have to knock France off first. And Russia is so backwards and big and lumbering and so slow that Germany will have 42 days. This is like precisely calculated according to railroad times and whatnot. Germany will have 42 days to knock France out of the war. And if they knock France out of the war in 42 days, then they can throw their armies on tanks, send them across Germany, and then meet and defeat the now mobilized Russians. That's the German plan. The problem is, the Schlieffen Plan calls for an invasion of France through neutral Belgium. And they thought they would be able to just waltz right through Belgium and circle Paris, with the idea of Alfred von Schlieffen was the rightmost flank, that rightmost soldier of the German army was to dip his right arm into the English Channel, into the North Sea. Okay, so they would totally block any kind of flanking operation. Surround Paris, cut Paris off, France surrenders, hop on trains, go across the country, fight the Russians, win the war, and everything will be better for everyone in the future. Yes? They're involving France because France and Russia have an alliance. So they know if they're going to fight with the Russians, France is going to get involved. And France wants their territory back. France wants that Alsace and Lorraine back. So knock out France first, that'll be easy, then go across and fight the Russians. That's going to be the plan. This goes nothing according to plan. All right?
That's what I thought, yeah.
In August of 1914, Germany launches this military operation. They march through Belgium. Belgium puts on a more fearful resistance than the Germans ever accounted for. The Germans thought the Belgians would just open up the gate and let you walk on through. The Belgians put up a defense, thanks in large part to a relatively new development in the military scene, the machine gun. The most devastating defensive weapon of the First World War. Armies equipped with machine guns can keep at bay far larger forces. Machine guns in 1914 are a defensive weapon. They're big and they're heavy. You can't carry them with you like Rambo. All right? They're stationary weapons. All right? So Belgium is fortified, and Germany is tremendously slowed in their advance. And every day that ticks by, tick, 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 every day that goes by, we're losing days on that 42-day Schlieffen Plan. Also, when Germany invades Belgium, Britain decides to stand behind their 1839 treaty with neutral Belgium. And so Germany will then declare, or have war declared on it by Britain. Britain, did I say Germany stands behind it? Britain stands behind their treaty with Belgium. So Britain joins this war effort with the French and now with the Russians. All right? So World War I is on. And there's our alliance system, right? There's our alliance system. Germany and Austria-Hungary now waging war against Russia, France. Belgium joins the fray. Now, I didn't mention Italy. Italy was originally a part of the Triple Alliance. They're going to quit that right away. Italy sees that they have no obligation to defend Belgium or Britain. They have no obligation to defend Germany or Austria-Hungary because those countries weren't attacked. They were doing the attacking. So Italy does not join this war. And in fact, after a few months, they will join the other side of the war. They will join the French and the British side of the war because they want to get land back. Yes, in the back.
Britain and Belgium joined France and Russia?
Belgium was just forced to because they were invaded by Germany. Britain joins France and Russia. Absolutely. Okay, so now here's our war. All right? First, we're starting on the Western Front, where Germany hoped to sweep in and immediately have France surrender. That failed. And the Western Front will turn into a stalemated, here's a good word for you to know, a stalemated war of attrition, where each side is going to try to grind the enemy down. A war of attrition, where each army tries to grind the enemy down. Armies will dig in hundreds and eventually thousands of miles of trenches along the Western Front. Here's a modern picture of what trenches look like that remain today.
Holes or shells?
Now, this is the trench line, this zigzaggy thing, and then these are all shell marks. The trenches were purposely dug in zigzaggy patterns because if any kind of shell or explosive landed within the trench itself, if you were standing right next to it, you were a goner. But if you were like around this bend, you'd be safe. So you would make them zigzaggy so it would limit the amount of people that would be hurt if bombs landed within them.
Or grenade.
Whatever. Yeah, or
It's
shells.
also, it was also difficult for tanks to roll across it.
No, they're not that zigzaggy.
They're not as intense
Okay.
as the 19th
So anyway, we have a western front here that's going to establish through Belgium and France, from the English Channel to, or from the North Sea, pardon me, to Switzerland. And a line of trenches that will be largely stalemated from 1914, 15, 16, 17, all the way to the end of the war in 1918. Not much movement on the western front. Very different story in the east. Russia mobilized far faster than Germany ever believed that they could. And by the first month of the war, Germany is actually being invaded by Russia in the east. But fortunately for the Germans, the Russian military is actually pretty inept and disorganized, and they are soundly defeated by the Germans. And so we see on the Eastern Front tremendous movement in the front lines. Russia does horribly in this war. They do so horribly that by 1917, the Russian people actually overthrow their government. In 1917, in February of 1917, the Russian people will overthrow the Tsar. The Romanov dynasty that had ruled Russia for 300 plus years is now gone. There's hopes in 1917 that this new provisional government will hang on and keep Russia in the fight until they win. Because you don't want to surrender, because if you're Russia and you surrender, you lose everything. So they want to hold on until they win. But Russia is doing so poorly in this war, and there's so much frustration about fighting the war, that by October of 1917, there's a second Russian Revolution. This is known as the October or Bolshevik Revolution, led by a guy named Vladimir Lenin. This is the Russian Revolution. Once Lenin takes over the government in Russia, he quickly moves to negotiate an ending of the war with Germany. Yes?
Isn't Lenin sent by Germans, though?
Yes, but that's getting deeper, yeah. The Germans actually planted Lenin back into Russia to cause problems, and he did. It worked. So Russia will back out of the war by early 1918. All right? Russia will back out of the war by early 1918. This would be devastating if not for the fact that the United States is going to be entering the war at the exact same time the Russians are backing out. Now, for the Americans' part, we get in the war for a couple reasons. One, we get very frustrated with the Germans' use of what we call unrestricted submarine warfare.
U-boats.
The Germans keep using their U-boats to sink ships in the Atlantic Ocean. Many of those ships are American merchant ships. Some of those ships are carrying American citizens. We're not too happy with this. Now, yeah, a lot of you guys have heard of a ship called the Lusitania. The Lusitania was actually sunk in 1915, well before the United States got involved in the war. But it's a good example of this unrestricted submarine warfare, sinking anything on the open seas. So this sinking of civilian ships makes America frustrated. But then the real thorn in the American side is when the British intercept a telegram going from Germany to Mexico to convince the Mexicans to join the fight. And if they win the war with Germany, they can take back all of that Mexican territory that the United States took from Mexico in the 1840s. The British get their hands on this. They tell the Americans about it. The Mexicans are like, no, we're not fighting the Americans. But the Americans are now really angry with the Germans, and we declare war on Germany in April of 1917. It won't be until the spring of 1918, though, that we actually put an army together to get to the fight. Yes, ma'am?
Could you explain that again? So the intercept how that was supposed to go through?
Germany tried to get Mexico to join this big war, and if Mexico would attack the United States, well, then we would be occupied in the southern United States, and we couldn't send an army across the Atlantic Ocean. That was basically it. So to keep us occupied, to keep us out of Europe, it failed. We need to talk about another front in this war. Not only was the war fought on the Eastern Front and in the Western Front, there's also an Ottoman Empire front. Now, I haven't mentioned them yet. The Ottoman Empire is going to choose Germany to ally with when this war breaks out. Why? They've got economic relationships with Germany, and they think Germany's going to win. You pick the side in a conflict you think is going to win. They picked poorly. All right? So the Ottoman Empire is going to join the war pretty early. And if you guys recall, one of the greatest assets to the Byzantine Empire and then the Ottoman Empire was location, location, location. That is not an asset when you are now stuck in a world war. Because now they're going to be fighting the British on the straits of the Bosporus and the Dardanelles. And they're going to be fighting the British in the Middle East and the Arabs in the Middle East. And they're going to be fighting the Russians in the Caucasus. Location, location, location means the Ottomans are going to be fighting a three-front war. War does not go very well for the Ottoman Empire, and they will ultimately be defeated along with the Germans and the Austrians. The end of the war comes in 1918, where Germany ultimately can't keep fighting this fight. They're out of resources. They're out of manpower. And the United States is now pouring new resources and manpower into the fight. And on the 11th hour of the 11th month, a day of the 11th month of 1918, 1918, Germany will officially agree to a ceasefire. And the war comes to an end. In the next year, we've got, let's fast forward here. In the next year, we've got a meeting following the most devastating war that mankind had ever fought with each other. All right? We've got a meeting that's going to be held in Paris. It's known as the Paris Peace Conference. Out of the Paris Peace Conference comes the Treaty of Versailles with Germany. The Treaty of Versailles does 5 important things. 4 of them punishments for Germany. 1 of them creation of the League of Nations. The Treaty of Versailles creates an international organization meant to avoid having anything like this happen again. As you guys remember from APUSH, that's not going to work out very well because the United States, which required, even though our president came up with the idea of the League of Nations,
We didn't join.
the United States Constitution requires our Senate to approve treaties. And the American Senate, for a number of reasons, but largely because we didn't want Europeans deciding when we would go to war, the American Senate rejected the Treaty of Versailles. Now, the rest of the Treaty of Versailles deals with Germany's punishments. Germany is going to lose territory. Not only territory in Europe, but also all of their colonial holdings. Germany is going to lose their military. No navy for Germany. No air force for Germany. Only a tiny army of 100,000 men. And then Germany is going to be forced to sign what's called the War Guilt Clause. Despite all the reasons that we talked about for the lead up to World War I, Germany is going to have to sign a piece of paper that says this war was our fault. Now essentially that becomes a legal document, so then the final punishment, the Allies, Britain and France, can charge Germany to pay reparations, to pay for the losses in the war. So Germany will be made to pay horribly punitive reparations.
6.6 billion.
Yeah, I think it amounts to about $40 billion or $400 billion in today's dollars. Yes.
I'm so confused because wouldn't it be like Austria-Hungary?
You would think, but Germany had the most to take from. Okay, Austria-Hungary is going to get broken. Don't get me wrong, we're just not getting it for AP World purposes. We're not dealing. We're also, in addition to Germany being defeated, there's going to be a treaty worked out with Austria-Hungary, or a treaty with Austria, a treaty with Hungary, a treaty with the Ottoman Empire. And here's where we have the final consequence of World War I, the end of long-lasting empires. The Russian Empire, dead during World War I. The German Empire, dead because of World War I. Austro-Hungarian Empire, destroyed because of World War I. The Ottoman Empire, gone because of World War I. All of these empires coming to an end are going to be hugely important because all of the people that lived within those empires are now going to want to determine for themselves how to be ruled. And we'll talk about that on another day.